All right, we're good to go.
All right, so I'd like to call our meeting of the school district's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee to order. I'm going to pull up the agenda here so I can make sure I don't get it wrong when we start. I suppose we can start by just calling the roll. So I guess I'm going to identify everyone in order. This will take a minute or two doing it this way. But I'll just call you one by one and you can just identify yourself here and you can unmute yourself when I say your name. Tim Shell? Here. Lara Ostrander?
Here.
Audrey Deppen?
Here.
Melissa Hernandez?
Here.
Stephanie Shevchik?
Here.
Diane Rusk?
Here.
Monique Mobley?
Here.
Isabella Moore?
Here.
Jamie Striffen Chakota?
Here.
I want to say Senderita Poggle, but Gina Poggle?
Here.
Sam Kaufman?
Here.
Christy Scheppelman?
Here.
Bethany Pottinger?
Here.
Melanie Meester?
Meister, and I'm here.
Thanks. Sorry, Mel. Paul Whitley?
Here.
Pam Potter?
Here.
Michelle, and you don't have your last name on your ID, so I can't say your last name. I'm sorry.
Berg.
Michelle Berg. I thought you were going to be late, Michelle. I didn't recognize you right away.
I'm here.
All right, there you go.
Time.
Michelle was not here last week, so we won't make her be the only one to introduce herself again, but Michelle is one of the Westport representatives.
Oh.
Joel Lewis?
Here.
Katie Grindall?
Here.
Nia Vang?
Here.
Mike, is it Pisani?
Here.
And Leslie Petty.
Here.
Is there anyone that I missed whose name was not stated who is here in attendance and is other than Rebecca? Okay, hearing no one, then the next section is approval of the minutes from our previous meeting that should have been sent out to everyone, but it was basically just a summary of the last meeting we had earlier this month. It was very briefly discussed at the regular board meeting last night. Did anyone check anything on that was incorrect? It would otherwise need to be approved. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the previous meeting.
May I correct my spelling of my name?
Absolutely.
Thank you. It seems right everywhere else. Just in the minutes, the second word of the last name, R-U-S-K. I think it was spelled R-U-S-C-H or something like that.
Okay, that's good.
So R-U-S-K.
I also noticed a misspelling in my name. My first name was spelled incorrectly, so I presume we can do that. It's just spelling my first name, M-I-C-H-A-E-L. So I have the same addition to make, but any other corrections?
My last name's missing a letter too.
Which one, Sam? Is it spelled K-A-U-F-M-A?
Double N.
Double N. Okay. So other than those three spelling issues, any other changes?
There's in Monique's name, there's an extra there's a comma between Monique, comma, Mobley.
Okay. All right, so other than those four changes, as I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as is with those corrections.
Make a motion.
I second.
I couldn't tell who said that second one, but I know Sam also seconded. So Joel motion, Sam seconded. Everyone can unmute themselves. All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. And there's Brian. Brian Hafer here. Add you to the roll call. All right, so with the approval of the minutes, I'd ask if there's also a motion to approve the agenda for today as written. I believe that was emailed out by Rebecca several days ago. I hear you, Stephanie. Any amendments or anything like that to our agenda? Otherwise, we need a motion just to approve as is.
I'll make the motion.
Okay, Joel motioned. Anyone have a second?
Second.
Thanks, Tim. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Okay, hearing no nays. First item that actually requires some action on the agenda is the nomination and selection of a committee co-chair. This is something that we discussed briefly at the last meeting. I had requested that we have a co-chair to work along with me to effectively run the meetings, to kind of do what I'm doing right now, to put together the agenda with Rebecca and to have this set out ahead of time. I'd really appreciate some help doing it. So if anyone is willing to self-nominate or if necessary, nominate someone else, the floor is open to whomever wants to do that. I don't think we need nomination by a third party or anything like that. If someone wants to volunteer, I'm open the floor to that.
I'll volunteer.
If we need a second for that, I'll second.
I'll second that too.
Okay. Anyone else want to volunteer or nominate anyone? Not that I'm trying to get anyone else, Joel, I just have to keep it open. Okay, well, hearing no one else, you self-nominating or nominating anyone else, I guess we can do this just by voice vote since there's no one else. All in favor of Joel Lewis being named as the committee co-chair, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. And there you go. Congratulations, Joel. You are now officially our committee co-chair. To avoid accidentally hanging up on you, I don't think I'll make you a co-host of the Zoom call today, but we can get you set up so that you can be added on as a co-host in the future, just so you and I can both do the same thing of unmuting people and whatnot. And that's more or less all we do. But other than that,
All right.
that's all. That's all it takes. But in case I'm not here, Joel can run the meetings in the future too.
Okay.
All right. So the second part of our agenda is the Waunakee Community School District Board Statement. This is referring to the statement that was read and adopted by the board at our meeting last Tuesday, the 8th. In case anyone didn't see it or hear it, I can read it for the committee now. If I can find it right away.
It is attached to the agenda, so if people have the link to the agenda, they could open it up.
Okay. Thanks, Rebecca. The final language we had, and thank you to Gina and Mel and Brian for doing the vast majority of the drafting of this. This reads: the Waunakee Community School District values community. We, as the directors of the Board of Education, appreciate the uniqueness of everyone throughout our school system and within the village. We celebrate diversity and welcome the differences that each person contributes to our learning community. In the Waunakee Community School District, we will not allow language, actions, or symbolism that are demeaning, malicious, racist, or sexist to be directed towards people of any race, religious belief or non-belief, gender, age, sexual orientation, or ability. We wholeheartedly and cooperatively provide our support and encouragement to the charge of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Ad Hoc Committee. We advocate for the use of anti-bias strategies that allow educators to create an inclusive and identity-safe learning environment. We stand behind educators who are leading courageous conversations in their classrooms and in the community. This was passed unanimously last Tuesday on a 6-0 vote. Brian wasn't there, but I think he would have voted for it if he was. So that was passed. Do you have any comments or opinions on what was drafted? Or anyone who was involved in the drafting, feel free to comment if you feel necessary. All right, hearing no comments, we can move on to the next agenda item, which is discussion and consideration of a mission or vision statement for the ad hoc committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion, with attending discussions of any terminology related to the mission or the vision of the committee. I guess maybe I can just ask Joel, do you have any opinions on how to go on this one, or where would you like to start?
So in terms of what, coming up with a mission?
Sure. I mean, when we last discussed last meeting, we had kind of bandied about the idea of people getting together and kind of coming up with a draft idea for what our mission statement should be or what it could be. I don't know if we've done the work on that, or if this is maybe the good time now to kind of talk about where we want to start with that, or if individuals want to put that together now.
Yeah, I think that would be good. The only thing I was saying last time is that we should align with what the school district already has as well, right? We don't want to have something separate. But I think this is definitely something we should probably as a group just talk about to figure out what we want to have in that statement. Do you have, I don't know if Mike, do you have what the school has, what Randy produced?
In terms of like an overall community or what the school district's vision statement is?
Yeah. This way people have an idea.
So the mission statement is pretty simple. It's committed to children, committed to community, and committed to excellence is what's on the website.
I thought, didn't Randy have something else? I don't know if it was core values. He had something else that he showed me that he updated that I thought had more things to it.
Well, the vision statement's longer.
Oh, okay. Would you be able to read that one?
Yeah, the Waunakee Community School District is a collaborative learning community that works with students, staff, families, and community to ensure that every student is ready for college and career through a focus on data, research, best practices, and engagement with students to be active partners in their learning.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yep.
We definitely need to come up with something specific for the group then as well to add to that. What does everybody else think?
Here, I'll say something. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I wasn't at the meeting in person the other week. I did have the opportunity to sit and listen to it, which for me, I feel like sometimes that helps because I feel like I'm a processor. But someone mentioned in the meeting just like a simple phrase that it was like, we exist to enhance the diversity, equity, and inclusion of the Waunakee Community School District. And I have to say, I kind of like that. It just was simple. I don't know if you wanted to go deeper than that, but there was.
Yeah. Could you say that again? What it said?
That our group's goal, well, no, we exist to enhance the diversity, equity, and inclusion of the Waunakee Community School District.
It does sound good. It's straight to the point.
You know,
yeah, I don't know who mentioned it. It's one of the ladies that was in the meeting said something of that, and I took note of it and said, that sounds really nice.
Can we extend that beyond just the school district and onto the community and our impact on how the community sees diversity and values diversity?
Well, I was going to suggest if the mission of the school district is to ready students for college and careers, there's an equity piece to that, and there's certainly an inclusion and diversity piece to that. I don't know what to say about the community piece, or what's the scope of within or outside of the district. I do wonder if, to Joel's point of trying to connect it to mission, since, there's a lot of pieces when we say supporting and enhance diversity and inclusion and equity. I think, what does that mean? That the students have the same opportunities to learn, without having anxieties or pressures of dealing with comments or other, activities, or is it that we have equitable outcomes? So I'm kind of, that's what I'm playing around with right now. Sorry, that's a little messy.
Could I suggest,
Go ahead.
could I suggest that we try to relate this to the school's vision statement by saying that somehow getting some wording in there that our goal is to make sure that students that the vision of the school district is achieved and not hindered by any kind of bias or lack of access to resources, and somewhat along those lines. And that way, maybe we could link it to the school vision statement.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along those lines as well. Maybe even the statement that the school just made, if we could pull that up and maybe pull something from that to add to that, the one that Mike just read.
Would it also be ideal if we found a way to kind of merge some of the ideas, especially with what Michelle was saying, but also do a better job of incorporating it as it pertains to community, almost merging a vision statement from the community as well as the schools? Does that make sense? I feel like it's almost a merger of the two ideas.
No. So how do you think we could start that off? What do we want to see with the community? Like, what is our vision? Now, obviously, we want to be working with the community, but like, how do we word it?
A possible suggestion is changing unequal access.
So, Joe, I'm sorry, I had my hand up.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Maybe, are we raising hands or not? Maybe
I don't think we're raising hands. I didn't see it, and I'm sorry. That's my fault.
That's no problem. No, that's perfect. That's perfectly fine. So what I would suggest is to so the mission is really identifying our purpose. That's really what the mission is, identifying our purpose. And I think whatever we do here, as far as a mission, it will align with the mission. And certainly if we decide to go with a vision, it will also align with the vision of the school district as well. So what is the purpose of this ad hoc committee? The purpose, I would imagine, is to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion across all spectrums. And of course, I'm just throwing language out here, across all, to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion across all spectrums through, through educating, instructing, hiring, wherever it may apply. I mean, that's really what we want to do, is look at what is the purpose of this organization, really, and that's really how the mission is to go, is to ensure access, is to, ensure access to, to students across all ethnicities, or to teachers I think if we, I don't know if this is for the district. I'm hearing that we should do it for the community, or is it for the district? It's my understanding that the work that we're doing is for the district, although that, or is it also for the community at large as well?
I mean, if you think about it, though, I mean, the community and the district that's really the same thing, right? Because where are students coming from, and obviously with the parents being involved, so I think it intersects. I guess that's what I'm thinking when I'm hearing community, right? Because this.
Yeah. So what I want us to do is to keep it as focused as possible. When you read the charge, it doesn't say community though. All of the tasks that we've been asked to pursue, it's really all about the education, the school district. It doesn't really reach beyond the community.
So,
so I mean, I do appreciate us looking at this beyond the school district, but I also think that we want to be consistent of what we're being asked to do as well. And when you look at the charge, what we have laid upon us, it really doesn't say the work there is within the community. It's really focused in on the school district.
Can I piggyback on that? Because I'm just thinking about what we can control. And so I feel like in the school district, we can control the choices that we make about our curricular resources, who we're hiring, the kinds of professional development that we're providing for teachers. But we can't necessarily control some of the things that go on in the community. I feel like we can promote some things and try to impact changes through what we're doing in the district. So I wonder if we could have some language about, because of what we're doing in our school district, it will have this impact on our community at large.
Mm-hmm. And I'd like to piggyback off of Bethany and Leslie. In thinking about that, what supports need to be in place not only for providing opportunities for students, but also providing staff with resources and supports as they navigate those new conversations with families and with one another through these conversations.
Can I just make sure we just kind of get back to the basics and make sure I understand what we as an ad hoc committee are charged to do? It seems to me that all we can do as an ad hoc committee is identify problems and recommend solutions.
Yeah, I would agree with that, Pam. I was feeling like we couldn't use that language of ensure, but like maybe inquire or investigate, or someone said the word promote, advocate, advise. I think those are some actions that we can take rather than, I don't think we have the strength to ensure these practices.
And Melanie, that's a very good point. I do agree with that. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. As I was saying, I'm just playing around with language. And
words, yeah. I mean, I do like the promote, because that's really what we're trying to do, right? At the end of the day, it's the school board who are going to make the decisions, right? We're just hopefully providing input. So, I mean, I do like the things I've been hearing, even with the hiring, right? Because the things in school, right? Like when you start talking about more minorities being hired, staff, when you start talking about education curriculum, like obviously what's going on now with the curriculum now, Tim has been putting things in place for that to happen. So it's just focusing on those key areas that are going to create an environment for every student. And I think it's really important. We start talking about language barriers, right? We start talking about disabilities. So it's not just about, like race. But I feel like we need to be able to encompass all of that. So every student is represented.
Yeah, I think a couple words you might want to throw in there is advocate for, because I forget who said it, but yeah, I mean, this is not a decision-making body. So you are to advocate for what the charge of the committee is and provide solutions to the board to make a decision. So.
What if maybe an important distinction as well? I mean, in the agenda, we're talking about a mission and a vision, and a vision doesn't have to be what we are able to do. A vision is what we hope happens in the future, and our mission, as I understand it, is what we do to work towards that. So it depends on if we want to go the route of talking about like, what's the end goal? What's the perfect situation? That to me is what a vision is. So I guess maybe there needs to be some clarity about which of these we're currently talking about. And I don't know if our goal today is to get some draft language, or if someone could kind of clarify that for me too, because generally this kind of stuff kind of rolls around in my head for a little bit before I don't know.
I mean, it sounds like we're trying to get the language, like we're trying to at least pare it down to something.
Sure.
And then obviously this is not the final, but this is just more of we're brainstorming and saying, okay, this sounds good. Let's move in this direction. And we should be able to walk away with something, right? And it shouldn't be too long. A mission statement shouldn't be too long. So
I mean, if the vision is the ideal, like Gina was saying, the vision is that we will no longer have predictable patterns based off of characteristics of groups of individuals, right? And within our school district or something like that. Because Joel, you kind of talked about barriers, and it's about getting rid of the barriers that are predictive to outcomes.
And I might add that my hope for the future would be that every kid feels safe and welcome in our schools.
Yeah.
So I just put some words together in the chat, and it might be a little bit too specific. I wasn't sure what words to use so I just picked policy, data, perceptions, and curriculum, and so I might have been reaching too far in. But it sounds like people are saying we examine some pieces of evidence, we identify opportunities. I think I heard somebody say problems. Maybe I should have put that in there. And the purpose is to promote equity, diversity, and inclusion. I said promote twice. That supports the vision of the Waunakee Community School District and recommends solutions to the Board of Education for action. Is that kind of starting to get to it?
Yeah.
I see other people are putting in better words.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the words too.
Would it be helpful if we created a Google Doc that we put these in and then people could wordsmith and edit in one spot and actually have a place instead of in the chat? Because I'd be happy to copy and start that.
Yeah, let's do that. Would you mind doing that?
It looks like Tim already has something in Google Doc if you scroll up to 6:20 p.m.
Yeah, that is not, I mean, Tim, you can explain what that is. That's
right.
Not,
that's our teaching and learning vision for the district.
Right.
Correct. But that's a Google Doc though, right?
It is. It is. Well, that's kind of a master document, and but I can copy that. But I think it'd be just as easy to take Katie up on her offer and have her start a new doc, drop that link in the chat, and then we can begin incorporating some of the excellent language that I see in the chat stream. And certainly, the work of our system-wide committee, if there's language in that vision of teaching and learning people want to include, I think that's wonderful. But that was intended to be kind of a visionary document to guide our teaching and learning projects in the district.
So Tim, that's the original document where you have the vision?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I kind of, if I've done it right, you should have view rights to it.
You have.
I don't think you have edit rights.
No, we can't edit.
No.
Give me 1 second, I almost have it ready.
So I just have a question. So if we ever have to go back and see, now obviously we have the agenda, but if we're talking about stuff like this and we're going to put it in the document, is this something that we can add to over time? Like, how do we get access to that? Or do we have to all be on a Zoom call to be able to do that?
The document is accessible to anybody who has the link, and then as long as Katie makes all of us.
So right now I have the document set up that anyone with the link can edit, but what I'll do is I'll turn that off, and I can work with Rebecca and have Rebecca share this document out with everybody who's on the committee, and then only the committee people can edit this document. So right now, if you spread this link out to anybody can jump on, but I can also turn that off and restrict it, but I can work on that with Rebecca in the back end tomorrow, that we can close that up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, I think we want a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to keep it open.
Maybe I'm just being paranoid, but I'm a little concerned about how 25 people can edit a document on site. And I'm wondering if we might want to think about gathering as much ideas for language as we can at this meeting, and maybe asking a subcommittee to draft something.
Dr. Potter, 25 people can edit a Google Doc. We have Google
Oh,
Docs out there.
I mean, technically yes, but I'm thinking just in practical terms, how that's.
I'm assuming, is there like track change? Like, can you see the changes or no? When you're editing?
Yeah, it's live.
Okay.
I imagine we'll start seeing some themes that repeat themselves, and then we can kind of see where people are, we can cobble them together and change things. And maybe one person should be in charge of actually creating, cobbling them together in some way.
You could actually add in tables, and then in each box you have different cells where a couple people could add different ideas for people to look over and think of combining. And then you don't have to do each row.
You could just comment out instead of actually making changes.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we want to start it? What do we want to start adding to the document? Because I know we had a lot of stuff. I've been writing some stuff down too. How should we?
So Joel, my suggestion is we all just go into the Google Doc right now and take a look at it together. Or you can, if one person would like to share their screen and be the actual person to actually type and make the changes as we go. So there's a single person typing and noting so that we don't have 6 different people in there typing. That would work really well. I do this all the time with a whole bunch of district people. So in FYI, that's how it works best.
I'm happy to share and type. If people want to do that, then they can kind of talk and I'll draft in what we have.
Thank you so much, Katie.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Just because I'm working off a cell phone.
So. Got it.
Yeah, so
daily. So.
Great, we can see your screen. Thank you for sharing.
Awesome.
I'll blow it
and
up.
So now we should all be looking at Katie's screen, and so she should be the only one typing. As a general rule, kind of like try to talk one at a time just for Katie, so that she's not trying to like catch up. It's quite a bit to type and have to listen to everybody.
So what I have there right now is just things that I copied from the chat that I saw. Since I'm going to be only on this screen, I won't be able to see the chat anymore. So that won't be helpful in that end. But these are the things that people had put in the chat that I copied over.
I think one word I did like was promote. So obviously we're advocating. So maybe the ad hoc committee exists to advocate and promote diversity, equity, and inclusion for every student.
One thing we have to also keep in mind that we are an ad hoc committee and we're going to disperse at some time. So we exist now, but we won't exist in the future.
Right.
So that's why I'm thinking that maybe we want to, again, get back into this idea that we're convening to identify issues and make recommendations.
Actually, Mike, how long is this committee for?
Obviously, he stepped away.
Oh, okay. All right. So what do you,
I suspect this ad hoc committee is going to last this year, at least. And I think it's important to almost, but we have to talk about it as a board to see the length, but there's no end date at this point.
There was some language in the original charge, though, that we were, I think, expecting us to write a report by a certain date.
Pam, I have that in front of me. It says number 7 on our charge is to report to the Board of Education a summary of our work within 12 to 18 months. So a solid year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess I would add to that, knowing that the scope of this committee is limited, we could have even stronger language though, because we're either employees or community members that also wouldn't go away even if this committee ends. So like if there is some work that we want to get done or isn't accomplished, this group could just form informally, or members of this group could continue on.
That's true.
I'm adding words just to get us going. This is just like trying to come from my head.
Not sure if this is going to come through because of my connection, but maybe the idea of promoting growth through, I don't know, but the idea of promoting growth, because we're not going to necessarily change everything right away, but we could promote growth to develop more inclusivity and equity in our practices. I'm not sure, but I think the idea of promoting growth is something that an ad hoc committee, like we're trying to provide information to come up with solutions. Just a thought.
So maybe we could also say, I like where you're going with that, maybe to help promote a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Yeah.
Yep. I like that. I like that.
Culture.
Develop
Right.
a culture. That's good.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Because when you develop a culture, you help integrate the importance of diversity, equity, inclusion. Of you say every student, but I would push us to say educators, students, and staff.
Yeah, so it's not just about the students.
Exactly, right. The efforts that we put forth is really about everyone.
Yeah. I also did like the words safety and welcoming, if somehow we can put that in as well. So what do people think about that?
There's a great point in the teaching and learning vision that is the first point: learning environments will be safe, inclusive, engaging, and inspiring, and inspire students to take initiative for their learning. But the words that really caught me there was the safe, inclusive, engaging, and inspiring.
Yeah, we could just pull that out and put it in. Those words.
Can I ask, what is the main thing that we have been tasked to solve? I mean, I know that there was a list, but we should probably also make sure we're kind of referencing what we are trying to also get in motion to make some of this happen. Because I think it was Brian who said we can't make these decisions. We're not a committee who can make decisions. But we can certainly provide insight to help people make decisions based on our suggestions. So maybe we kind of need to, like, there's so many great words here, but it becomes overwhelming when you're not a little more focused. And I feel like we're getting a little broad. Maybe we need to narrow it down a little bit more.
But, you know, I guess for me, the thing is that I think we should just put out all the ideas and then we can kind of pare it down. Because I feel like when we're brainstorming, if we start cutting our ideas down, you know, because as I'm hearing other people's things, you know, it might be changing my mind in terms of other things. So for me, I appreciate the fact that we're just putting it all there and then we can, you know, bring it down or join things together, that type of thing.
One thing that strikes me too is sometimes a vision statement or a goal is it's ambitious, right? And sometimes it's a little more general, whereas our objectives might feel a little bit more like that list for our charge where it said specific things about, you know, looking at particular policies or looking at curriculum. And so I'm wondering, I mean, not to make work to create objectives, if we could use that sort of document for the specific steps that we maybe take. And this can be a little aspirational because, I don't know, it feels good.
So I couldn't remember them all without going back into the document of the charge, but right here I listed, I know that talked about instructional practices, curriculum, assessment, hiring practices. I couldn't remember the rest of the charges, so that's why I put question marks here. So we could possibly list some of those charges in here that we're going to be identifying those issues related to those things that we're going to list to promote that type of environment.
We left out resources for staff.
Yeah, they talked about professional development.
And I guess when we were talking about that, or I forgot who brought that up, the goal there was to bridge that to the community in terms of, you know, being able to talk to people in the community, parents, you know, stakeholders, those type of things. Is that when we say resources for staff, is that what it is?
Yeah,
or is that more for the classroom?
I can speak to that. So if I'm a teacher in a classroom and I am bringing equity and diversity in my conversations, and kids go home and they say, we're learning about this in the classroom, how is it that we are bridging the teaching we're doing with our students, and as parents are hearing those things at home, so that we're all on the same page in that learning we're doing together?
Okay.
So one way to potentially bring community into the scope of this would be, in place of every student and staff member in WCSD, every member of our Waunakee or school communities. I prefer a singular, but.
Tim, can you say
You
that
cut
last
out, yeah,
little
you
part
cut.
again? You cut out. I couldn't hear you.
I apologize. Replace student and staff member with every member of our Waunakee school community.
I like the word stakeholders too, if there's some way of working that in there. Possibly if we, to make it more concise as well.
Yeah.
Where would you want stakeholders in place of?
I'm not sure. Maybe just keep it on the list of ideas.
Can I ask one more thing that maybe we just put on the back burner, because I'm not sure how we work this in, but number 4 says we're to review the economic trends and the housing and economic policies to see how that's affecting students and different people in our community. I'm not sure how we're going to fit that into that mission statement. I mean, maybe that's something for a different idea. But number 4 talks about reviewing economic trends in housing and other economic policies of our school district.
You know, that could be more generally those, it's like there's exigent factors that are, and that's one thing economic trends in housing might be, and they're factors that we can't control but influence every member of the Waunakee school community, and therefore we have to look at them to sort of get what the unintended consequences might be and how that might not. We might make a recommendation for a policy, but if we don't look at all those other factors, it might not work out the way we'd like. So maybe something to acknowledge the community factors. That is general.
Well, I think since we're as we are as a school district committee, I think one thing we do have to be really concerned about is to ensure that students have all students have access to resources that they need. We're dealing with that problem right now of students who might not have access to computers or internet or parents who can help them with their online schoolwork. So I'm wondering if we might take that kind of add on to that phrase about resources. Assessment hiring practices, resources or access to resources for all. Maybe that's where we can stick in the stakeholders. Access to resources for all stakeholders in the Waunakee Community School District.
Is that at the end or right here where I highlighted?
Back where we talk about resources, structural inclusion and access to resources, I think maybe.
Yeah, I'm not sure how this would fit in either, but I keep thinking of identifying and addressing barriers. I don't know where that might fit. But.
Mike and Joel, what do you guys think about? There's a lot of great information going on. Can we, like we did this last statement, can we put a small subgroup together to be able to form something to present?
Yeah, I think we're going to have to do. Yeah, I think we're going to have to do subcommittees.
I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of great information here. If we could get 3 or 4 people to outside of the meeting to be able to put something together that encompasses most of that to bring it back to the next meeting for agreement, I think that would work out best.
I agree, Brian.
There's 2 words that come to mind again is the actionable outcome. I think a lot of times we get caught in discussion, but then how do we take those to an actionable place?
And I think that the action that we're able to take is to provide recommendations since we can't enact anything. So maybe whatever that final action is supposed to be, we could conclude with a statement like that.
Noted.
Also, can you just put in the other language? I think community factors incorporates this, but I'm thinking of English as a second language learner, and I've been listening to some people in the community about just the very large, maybe Spanish is the first language community, and I was hearing, some stories about access. I know that school district has everything in multiple languages and everything, but maybe recognizing that. I also know that the school district, it has, translation and interpretation services. So maybe that's a community factor, but it just sort of struck me as, gee, maybe, I don't know if language sets a barrier that would get identified or It's
My only
incorporating
concern
what we already read.
I'm totally a proponent of that, but my concern of putting that language in there, then we haven't listed all the disabilities or races. Like now
That's a
we're getting
good
fine
point.
tuning of the diversity part. Like, and so if we're going to list EL as something, then we need to list, you know, autism as something, or, you know, like that's going to get very long and wordy as put in the mission statement.
I would note that that was something that we struggled with the other statement that was presented today. I frankly, now that school has started, I'm not sure that I would love to be a part. Like, I'm a language teacher, this is my jam, but I'm not sure that I can commit to being a part of this group that's going to work through it. But I would just encourage, if the group does decide to go down the road of including language about certain groups of people, that we really just are mindful about the inclusiveness of that language rather than disability. We chose to say ability rather than, you know, deficit thinking, that we just are mindful of that as we're writing it. So
thank you, Gina. And I also think that that's like an exhaustive list, right? Like that list could go on and on and on, and I don't want to exclude anyone.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. That's a very good point. I think we need to be very careful, really focusing down on specific areas like language. I think we need to ensure that this message is as inclusive, that goes across all spectrums and not just being as specific.
Yeah, because friends, I think this is all very great. I just have one question, and so everything that we've written here is no different than what's already on the school at the Department of Instruction high level down to Waunakee. If we're just doing the same thing, if we're going to rehash the same thing, just a question I'm putting out there, because I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, how are we different? That's my question. How are we different? None of this is different from what's already there, and I just want to know how we're different, because if we are doing the same thing, then I don't think we need to work through this so hard. But when I read this, it sounds a lot just like one of the school districts. I prefer something, personally, not that it has to be that way, really short, just like the diversity inclusion ad hoc team exists to identify issues related to diversity and inclusion in Waunakee. Like, just be done. But we can have something long, but when I read this, I mean, we can go to the DPI website, we can go to the Waunakee website, and it says almost all of the exact same things. And it's okay that we have that, but if that is the case, I just don't think we need to rehash it all. And that's just my personal choice and thought on that. And also, I have really short attention span, and I wouldn't read the whole thing anyways. Just for the people who have like a short attention span that are like this big. So I'm like, but that's already been said. Do we need to do it again? Don't we exist because maybe this isn't working? Am I wrong?
I would agree with Nina.
That's why I'm here.
Yeah, I would agree with Nina.
I agree with you too.
The very bottom statement to end, sorry, I can't see it because I'm not toggling, but yeah, thanks, Katie. Committed to ending practice, structures, and systems that oppress. That's pretty clear. That talks about our charge as a group, that talks about the charge that the board can take up after this group disbands. That's an idea for the group.
Okay. So I think at that point, let's create a subcommittee. So I don't know, 3 or 4 people who want to, I know Paul, Mike said, does anyone else want to be on the committee?
I'll be part of it.
Okay. I'm sorry. Who was that?
Nope. That was Nia. Sorry. I didn't do that. I was like, I'll be part of it.
Okay.
And sorry.
It's okay. And is there one more person? So I think 4 is pretty good. So it's even.
I would do it. This is Lara Ostrander.
Okay. So we have 4 people, and basically you're charged just to work through this and then bring back kind of more like a pared down version of this to the group.
Excuse me,
Does that sound?
Tell me who the 4 people are again?
Nia,
Paul,
Lara, Mike.
Yep.
Which Mike? I'm sorry. My apologies. I think there were 2 Mikes on our team.
Yeah, Mike Pisani.
Thank you, Mike.
Will all those people just add their names right here where I just put that, and that will be
Oh yeah, that
helpful.
sounds good.
You can type your own name.
You want to type my name, Katie?
Oh, Lara.
I know, but you know my name, and it's faster than me finding the document. Thank you.
Can you type my name? Sorry, my kid is here, and I am going to take a quick break from you.
Thank you. Sorry.
I like the anonymous sheep and the anonymous elephant.
To Google Docs. And I just want to be
one more
sure.
person.
Paul Whitley.
I also just want to do a quick check-in with the students to see if there's anything on your mind that you might want included, or if any of you want to either be a part of this team or take a peek at it before it comes back to us. I just want to make sure that you guys are heard.
I kind of like the idea of it being a little bit shorter. I think it makes it more direct, and it really gets down to the point of what we're trying to do as a committee. Really, I think that's a good place to go to. So yeah.
I'd be happy to read it before you release it to the whole committee again.
Yeah, I really like how I like it just being like short and simple, because it'll be like easier to read for a lot of people. But yeah, it looks really good so far.
So can I ask a question? Will this committee also develop a vision statement as well as the mission, or is it just focusing on the mission statement?
I mean, I thought right now we're just focusing on the mission. I think the vision's going to be a different project. You know, I think once we can get this done, then I feel like our vision would come together.
Okay. No, sounds good. I just, because we started out, we were going back and forth at one time, mission, vision, mission.
Yeah.
Vision, just to get an understanding of what's the purpose of the committee, of the subcommittee. The subcommittee. Yeah. Okay, sounds good.
When I look at the document that we have, our purpose keeps saying to review, to review, to review, to review. So in reviewing, we can identify the issues that are concerning to us. It doesn't ask us to recommend, it's just asking us to review.
Monique, you know very well sometimes you need to make recommendations even when they're not asked for.
Absolutely, but it's when we're thinking to what are we being asked to do, what is our mission? Our mission is being asked to review, and from there, it doesn't ask us to recommend, even though obviously we will have some points of interest that might be what we could look at recommending.
I think 6 says develop possible recommendations to the Board of Education for amendments to et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I think those were written by a fellow board member on here, so I think he's open to review and other opportunities as well. So,
because you know, there's going to be definitely things that are just going to come up that's not in our charge, that has to do with the school, students, staff, that type of thing. So we kind of have to be flexible in that sense. So are we good with this?
Yeah, Joel, why don't you move us on to considerations of methods of collecting data and information, since Mike stepped away.
Okay, I don't have the, could someone pull the document up, the agenda?
Hey, Mike, we're on to the next agenda item.
Sorry about that, I had a child issue. Next agenda item is consideration of methods for collecting data and information to inform the work of the Ad Hoc Committee for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. So this is the section regarding how we want to first start getting information. One obvious way that's not really written on here already is basically just go to administration and ask for information. One thing that was specifically requested to go on a future agenda would be basically to have a brief presentation on, for example, curriculum. And we may have someone here who could do that, who could give us a short presentation on it. Not today, but that'll be something we could probably put on the next agenda for, say, Tim to do. We could have a presentation from HR and have Brian Gabarski talk about that. So other than just asking for administration to tell us what some of us and some of us may not or may know, we have these options of doing a survey, doing an equity audit, or any form of a community student input session, having a time where people can disclose things that have happened to them or things they've been concerned about in the past, basically having like a community meeting. So with that, some of these specific items were suggested by specific people. So for example, the equity audit was one that several people brought up. And I guess the floor is open for where we'd like to start.
Did everyone see the chat? Is he in the, did he get in? He's trying to, he's on hold. We need to unhold him.
Nope, I'm on hold. I'm unheld and I made it in. Thank you to everybody.
Okay,
Sorry
just
for the
making
interruption.
sure. Just trying to pay attention to the chat too.
I have a question. I don't think I know what an equity audit is. What does that mean?
I could begin, and I'd love to have other people add to this, but I have participated in trainings through the National Education Association through a group called Just Schools, and they have outlined a whole process for questions that you ask, things that you consider to just get a baseline for what levels of equity exist within your district. And it's like a form that you walk through and visit certain topics and collect data around each of the issues. And I'm happy to, share more about that as a future agenda item, but that's the basis of what I was speaking from when I talked about it last time, but I know that others did as well.
So Tim, this is a question for you. Do you guys have already information about that? Like, do you guys take that information or collect that data?
So a true equity audit can be very comprehensive. We have a lot of disaggregated data, particularly in the area of student academic outcomes, student academic program participation, and also student discipline. Those would be probably the three leading areas where we have the most information. We can also generate some in our HR functions as well. But an equity audit, a full-scale equity audit, and I'm not familiar in particular with the NEA protocol that Gina's referencing, but the questions are broader in scope. And I think a question always with an equity audit is, do you do it internally and get the benefits of kind of that action research as a team, or do you work with an external partner to provide that outside objectivity to make sure you're not kind of gliding over important questions and missing something? So to kind of to answer you, Joel, we can provide a lot of that with existing information, but we don't have a complete equity audit.
Okay, but we don't have to start from scratch.
No.
Okay. So we shouldn't try to reinvent the wheel. If we have some information, we can add to it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of tools and structures that exist. There's some that are just yes, no questions where you provide evidence, and there's some that you rate yourself on a rubric, and they have a variety of lenses. So you can have a district-wide lens or a classroom-specific lens or an individual educator's lens. So there's a lot of tools that exist out there depending on what we want to investigate and how we want to collect that data.
Are these tools free or you have to pay for them?
there are definitely free ones that exist. I'm guessing the one Gina mentioned is free, but I have like 3 different types. One is from MAEC, which is an education, equity, and excellence focused place that was recommended by a website called Teaching Tolerance, which is well known for this work. So I bet the NEA would be good too.
How often is this data collected? Like how recent is the data? How often is the data collected? Or is it fluid, depending on school or program?
So a lot of our data collection for academic outcomes, program participation, disciplinary patterns, Leslie, that's typically something we gather on an annual basis. Now, I will say that because of what happened in the spring, we are probably going to have, like many institutions, a one-year hiccup on some, but not all of our measures. So we didn't have most of our state assessments past spring, but we can still have program participation data, many of our local assessments. But I think, you know, Mel and others bring up an important point. The outcomes are really important, but so are the practices and dispositions of students in the system, educators in the system, members of the public. Another thing that we do that we don't do annually is Dane County has a youth risk behaviors survey, which has a set of questions within a larger set of questions that relate to connectedness to the school community. And we've noticed some pretty striking disparities in student responses on that section over the years. And, you know, NIA's group at DPI does some partnership work with our Dane County Equity Consortium, also around trying to pull together some of this data for the county systems as a whole.
So Tim, where do you suggest we start as far as being able to collect or review this data? I mean, where because it sounds like it's a pretty comprehensive and involved process.
I'd like to, if we're just, so my brain went exactly to, so when you say equity, that's a really broad term when it comes to collecting data. And I need to understand from this group's point of view what we mean by that. Like equity is like, as in how students are doing. Because the data is collected based on very specific set. And when we just say equity, there's data, some data. I think overall this entire team would be very disappointed to see how little equity data we actually do have in Wisconsin. And for those of you who don't know, Wisconsin is #1 for having the largest achievement gap between white students and Black students. So, I mean, I bet you all the teachers here know.
Yeah.
That would be the race equity report.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
I knew that.
So, yeah. So for anybody who doesn't know, I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why I do the work I do. But I would need to understand. Equity is a really broad term. So like equity, like we have data on like, you know, disabled students, small subgroup, homeless students subgroup. It's a very broad term in it. And when we're saying we want to gather equity data, I just don't need to understand.
Wouldn't it depend on the outcome that we're looking at? So if it was achievement, you know, then it's the gap in terms of achievement between groups. If it's participation in programs, I'm thinking of participation in advanced placement enrollment or something like that, then it would be, you know, the rate at which people are enrolling in those courses or getting a certain score on the exam. I keep coming back to maybe what Gina brought up was that it sounds like the tool she was looking at has a lot of different facets of potential data. And with each sort of metric, the question about what equity means might be different. And so I kind of am craving of, gee, it would be great to see sort of a list of things, because some of the things that we've talked about, the data that may exist right now in the district are sort of quantitative related to, sort of counting certain things. And then it sounds like there might be some broader data in Dane County that's based on student perceptions. And then there might be some questions that are on that kind of, equity review that we don't have any data for, or we have to think about where we could get at that information. So I feel like I don't even know all of the different questions to ask yet.
So on the DPI website, there is a data dashboard. You can go there anybody can go there because it's made open to the public, and you can look at any of the data that's available because it's all public data. I can get you the links to the next meeting and anything you guys want to do. But what I do want to say real quick here is I want to understand for this team, specifically because we're doing this for Waunakee, how that means for us, because I can tell you in a quick summary already, and you can verify it with the data, is that Waunakee does not have the same issues as like Madison and Milwaukee, La Crosse, and Green Bay. We are an extremely well-to-do community. Our minority, we have a very small minority of students, and the bulk of our minority students are doing pretty good. I mean, not everybody, I'm not saying that, but if we had to break it down in numbers, I mean, I speak for myself too, being a minority parent, right? I mean, I live in Waunakee because I made the conscious, I don't know, okay, we won't go down that road, but here we are, Waunakee, my kids are doing fine, and I'm not saying every minority kid is or every non-minority kid is, but overall, the data says, because we are a much higher income community overall, we don't have the same issues as, for instance, Milwaukee, Madison. So, I mean, I want to know what equity means to us for our students, because I think that we're going to, and the data is going to tell you that our students are not doing nearly as, they're not actually faring that badly. They're faring well compared to other.
But I think the other thing is we're just focusing on education, right? Learning. Mm-hmm. But what about discipline? Who's getting suspended? Who's getting kicked out of class? So I guess I feel like and maybe this is where we need to have a list where we can kind of pinpoint certain areas. Because I do agree, obviously we moved to Waunakee for the schools, and the schools are doing pretty well. So we're not the same, like you said, as the outlier communities. So I think maybe just to kind of pare it down is just if we could get one of those lists. I know we can go to the website, but it'd be nice if we could just produce something so we can all just kind of see that. And then just pick areas that pertain to us.
Okay.
I don't know.
So if I could make a suggestion,
yes.
We'll schedule our next meeting, and what we could do is, and realistically, I'm not going to update everything. I'm going to take existing documents that we have just because of the pace of work we have on some other things right now. But I can take some existing documentation we have and share it with the group prior to the next meeting. It will provide some context, and perhaps we could discuss, how we want to augment it. Does it tell us enough? Are there other questions we have interest in? Some of the data will be a year or two old just because I don't think I'll have time to update a polished document before the next meeting, but just kind of put it out there.
Up to date. Hey, Tim, I'm real quick here. I'm going to remove myself off of the, I volunteered to do the vision statement. I remove myself off, and I will, with Tim, although Tim, you may prefer, I'm going to actually just, I'll mine all the data that I think was relevant when it comes to equity, diversity, performance, and I will provide that as well. So between Tim and I, we should have a pretty good idea of all of how Waunakee students are doing overall, what our general population looks like. And I think that should provide us some good base to start on. How does that sound, Tim?
That sounds fantastic, Nia. And Diane, I have a question for you.
Okay.
I had some discussions about a year and a half ago with David in your office about submitting some graduate records to generate reports. I know you folks are awful busy. If we did submit our data files, how long before system could get us some reports?
So you want to submit student level data and then know of enrollments in the UW system and things like retention, or
yes.
Okay. So probably what will have to happen is that it would be a formal data request, and I don't know how fast that would happen. You probably
I can answer
remember,
that for
like,
you
years
if you're
ago.
okay with that, Diane.
Mia, did you say you were able to get that?
I can answer that for you right away right now. One, right now, Tim, most federal requirements and mandates for reporting have been lifted. So I can actively tell you that our data team is not collecting data on that because we have so much other things to focus on. One of the biggest one is digital equity, which is making sure that our students actually have the internet. And that's actually our biggest thing that we're focused on right now. So any reporting, I mean, we like it. We want it for historical data, but it's not required right now federally to keep the money that we have. So we're not collecting any of that. So if you're asking for turnaround time, Tim, right now, you probably won't get it till next year just because we are not working on it.
No, I mean, and I think we did a sprint project with you guys back in the spring. So, I mean, I think the one thing I would have wanted from DPI, we got back in the spring. That was super helpful. That's actually county level data.
Okay, so Infinite Campus can provide data for you because our Waunakee uses Infinite Campus as the vendor in between. And so you can get some data there, but Infinite Campus would, they do it on a specific schedule, which I don't remember at the top of my head, but if you do need it, I'm sure they can spin it around whatever their schedule is, like a month or so, too.
Mia, why don't you and I set up a time to meet and we can kind of talk about what we've got.
Yeah.
And you could become more acquainted with what we have internally. And Diane, I might shoot you an email because we did sign a data agreement and that went into David, but we never followed up with grad files. So
I'll find out a little bit about what they would want as an actual process for that kind of request, and just so the ball could get rolling for it. And then, can I ask, Gina, could you possibly share the source? I feel like I would love to educate myself and do a little homework to just sort of see what the different elements are.
Yes, I'd be happy to, and I'm curious about Mel's resources as well. So maybe we can talk about what the process is for sharing information among ourselves. That would be helpful for me.
Maybe we should have a Dropbox or some place where we could just put all resources that the group comes up with, so that it's shareable.
Or even a Google Doc resource list.
Or something like that.
Google Drive.
Yeah, maybe a shared drive. We could get that set up.
I was wondering if there was any board policy around sharing information among us. That's really what my question was. I just want to make sure that we're following anything. Like if it happens outside of a meeting, as long as it's just the exchange of files, it's kosher. Is that accurate?
I don't think there's anything precluding that. I mean, you know how we communicated about the drafting of that statement for the board.
Right.
If you send it to me, it's a public record. But if other people are sending it amongst themselves, theoretically, someone could file an open records request for absolutely every single thing that every single one of us did in this community. But I don't think anyone has a.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly no harm in that. But if it's housed in the district Google Drive, I think that's probably also the case. So.
Right.
I'm happy to start a folder with Mel, and would we go through Rebecca, or what's the best way?
Rebecca's going to work on sharing out that document. She already emailed me about that. I sent her an email, so I'm wondering I can reply back to her and just ask her if she can create a shared drive for this ad hoc community, and then we will have her share it out with everybody. So I'll work on communicating that with her.
So yeah, I was really interested in hearing more about some of the audit materials that trustworthy organizations have out there, like Teaching Tolerance or like the NEA, because I feel like we have lots of data that we get from the school district or DPI about student outcomes and things. But I feel like there's also soft data that we might not even be thinking about looking at, like, you know, if the kids are seeing themselves in the books that we're reading, or, you know, just some of the things that the alumni brought up at that listening session was really powerful. And that was stuff that I hadn't thought of, and I've never seen that kind of data. So just in doing a Google search of equity audits for schools, some of the things that came up were like teacher behaviors and things like that. So I just think it would be worth looking at some of the things that are out there from trusted organizations, so that we're not just looking at the data that we may have looked at before, but we're investigating other sources of data.
Hey, I also chime in. I think I heard a comment about the difference between Waunakee schools and like a Madison. With much of my career being in Madison and Chicago, and I come to Waunakee and I see a lot of kids thriving. On the surface, we're thriving and we have a majority growing, but within that successful frame, I want us to continue to challenge ourselves to think about being flexible and responsive, because while there are more needs sometimes and less resources in a school like Madison, that challenged us as teachers to the very depth of our instructional ability to bring all kids in and meet them where they are. And what are we doing to replicate that in Waunakee alongside rich resources and meeting the 80? How do we close that gap and reach the rest? It's not enough to me.
Monique, why don't you go ahead? And I know you've been waiting for a while.
Thank you, Mike. I'd like to just add a point about the data and what was just being said by Laura and the previous speakers. I mean, there's data that shows us academics and discipline and all those kinds of things. Those are kind of easy to put your thumbnail and say, here's the data. But what I'd like to know more about, and just something for us to consider, is what activities are our kids being involved with? And I'd love to hear from some of the students here. I mean, many of our kids, our diverse kids, our lower economic level kids are not as involved in sports, clubs, activities, the running, the swimming, the baseball, and that they kind of they lose that ability as it keeps getting older, because now you have kids who've been, you know, almost at professional level sports by the time they reach high school, and it's hard for them to get involved with the athletics. They're not as confident about it. Maybe they don't want to get involved in, say, our drama or our music. I mean, what is the diversity that we have in the incredible array at the high school alone for our club org day that's going to be on Friday? There are 70 clubs represented. Be interesting to find out who's in those clubs. You know, and what does this look like as you trickle down from your middle school, your intermediate school? You know, what kind of equity do we have in accessibility and really outreach to families to have them participate in those sports? Because we do know that having a good feeling of participation in your school outside of the classroom helps you to be successful within the classroom. So thank you for letting me talk about that.
I was wondering if I could just also go back to what Nia mentioned about how Waunakee is exceptional in not having the type of problems that are typical of places like Madison and Milwaukee. And I think this all kind of comes back to, I think we'll see, probably the data that we examine will bear that out as well. What we need to keep in mind, though, is the issue of climate. And I think that one of the problems that we've already seen is that because this is such a homogeneous community, it's impossible for those in minority situations who feel that to have their voices heard and to make sure that and to feel confident that the problems that they are addressing are going to be understood by the community at large. So I think that we're all here because the schools are great, but it is a very homogeneous community. Just to give you an example, for those of us who don't celebrate Christmas, you can imagine what it's like to, you know, be exposed to all of these Christmas activities in all the way from kindergarten all the way through high school. So I think we might want to just keep in mind that what we're going out after some intangibles. And I think if we think about a survey that does address things like climate, and even though that can be kind of vague, I think that might point us in a direction that might be useful for us.
So I just want to kind of just put it out there. Let's, since we have so many people in the group, and I definitely want everyone to be able to speak, let's go back to, I know in the beginning we were talking about raising hands or just talking. I think it'll just be better if we just raise hands, so then this way we can, everyone can have a voice. And then the other thing is, before I forget this, since we lost one person from the mission statement, we need another person to be part of that. I actually would like a student to be part of that, if they feel comfortable doing that. If not, that's okay.
I guess I'm willing to help with that. If they need a kind of student perspective, I'm good with that.
I'm sorry, who said I couldn't really hear? Who was that?
Audrey. That was Audrey.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much for volunteering.
What, I don't know who put their hand up first. Go ahead, Bethany.
Just to go back to like some of that soft data that we were talking about, Jamie put in the chat when we were talking about our mission and vision statement, something about preparing students to embrace equality and diversity, so that eventually they'll be able to just get along in our multicultural world. And that really struck me, because that was one of the things that the alumni brought up in that panel, was that you know, some of our white students felt like they weren't prepared to go out and be in a more heterogeneous place. And so I feel like that's another data point that, like, I don't know that we ever would have seen that in any of the data that we've collected thus far. And so I just thought that was a really powerful point, and I would love to see that also considered in our mission and our vision statement about like what we want our students to be able to do when they leave us and go out into the world.
Mike, so I can't see hands if anybody's raising their hand.
Go ahead, Mel. I think you're the one with your hand up right now.
So I agree with getting perception data, and the U.S. Department of Ed has multiple school climate surveys that are disaggregated based off of who you're asking. So they have a student-specific one, they have a parent-specific one, they have an instructional staff-specific one, and a non-instructional staff-specific one. So we could collect lots of different perceptions on lots of different topics. And then if we're a district that wants to come at it from a cultural or linguistic lens, they have specific ways to analyze the data to help get at those details more specifically. So the website is really helpful on how you organize your data and how you collect it and how you code it. And it sounds like Nia, you would be amazing at helping us code it if we wanted to use something like that. There's lots of tools that exist. And I do think school climate would get at those. Do I feel welcome? Do I feel safe? As a parent, can I bring things up without feeling judgment? Am I a partner with the educators for my child? All those kinds of more that soft data, those feelings, which we have a lot of outcome data, and I don't feel like we need to collect anymore. I think it's about the perceptions of the environment, relationships, and instruction and curriculum practices.
I do have my hand up in case, Mike, you didn't see. You probably did. That being said, Dr. Potter, and for everybody else, I want to let you know that my comment about like Waunakee's doing fine is really based off of just pure data. So if we just looked at pure data, we would say, and we were looking to identify issues, areas that had issues. We would just go right on to a different state. And that's and clearly I don't believe that, because that's why I'm here. because I know that's not true. So I would like to throw that out there. And that being said, Melanie, yeah, I could help you with a lot of IT stuff. Also, if we do want to take surveys, we don't just start from scratch. There's lots of things that at DPI that's available for us to do things like that with.
Leslie, go ahead.
Thank you. You know what? I really want to acknowledge Nia and her comment that she just made, because honestly, you know, when you said that Waunakee is okay, Waunakee is not okay. It's not. And as an African-American woman who is raising 2 Black sons in this school district, it is not easy. And as far as the academics, yes, they have it there, but there are so many other issues.
Yes, right.
When my kids show up for school in person or even virtually, they do not see a teacher that look like them. Okay, so there are a lot of underlying issues that we need to get to that is not all about the academics, because the academics is there. When we talk about equity, I mean equity across everything. I mean, because we have a system that is built around inequity. That's what we have here. And it's not only in Waunakee, this is across all areas in the country. It is systematic and institutional. And so our job really needs to be about what can we do to shift, to pivot, to move the needle in the direction that everyone
That's why we're here.
Everyone feels comfortable, everyone feels inclusive, everyone feels that they can be who they are. So Waunakee is not okay. There are many areas that we have a lot of work to do. That's what I wanted to say. And thank you for acknowledging that.
And you know,
Diane, go ahead. You had your hand up for a little bit.
Oh, I just wanted to say something Bethany said made me want to sing, because we were talking about learning outcomes. And I think the idea of student perceptions around inclusion and global and diverse perspectives, which is something that can be measured, you know, within a curriculum. And you know, there's, I think probably, I know there's a lot of tools on the higher ed side, there probably is on the K-12 side. It sort of strikes me that that's sort of an intermediate factor to get sort of this larger culture of inclusion. There's these intermediate steps about sort of measuring, okay, how do you change a climate? Well, does it change when students are forming certain perceptions, and how do you measure that? So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing in the learning piece into it, and trying to tease out some of those other learning outcomes that aren't necessarily, you know, explained in just a performance on a test or something like that.
So I guess, you know, we do have a lot of work, and I think the scope is so broad, right? And I think this is where it's going to be really important that, and I think this is where subcommittees come in, because we do have a lot of issues that we need to address. And obviously there's a lot of branches that go in different directions. So I think in terms of, because I was hearing what Leslie was saying, and of course I agree with that. But what Nia was saying, and I did understand this as well, was, you know, for me as a Black male and coming here, the education, we stayed here because of the education. And because we stayed here because of the education, we forfeited having more diversity. It was one of those choices that we just had to make. But that's just the top layer, right? So I think there's a lot of things we need to address as a committee. But I think what we need to do is stay focused in terms of those specific areas, which again, once we have our mission, and if we can be very concise with that, then I think we'll be able to tackle a lot of these areas. So Mike, you think we should wrap it up since it's 7:30, 7:40?
You must have kid problems again. So,
I was like, okay, I'll wrap it up.
Yeah, no, I think we should. I think there's a lot of great information there, and we are still really sort of in the structure phase of this, and so, we could talk for hours about how we're getting set, but I think right now, and I think Joel and Mike probably agree that, doing the mission, the vision, we've got some data that will be coming in. I think once we all take a look at that, we obviously have some macro things going on, not just the micro data in our community that we will need to discuss. But I think that will definitely be an option where we can use community input. And then Joel, and I know several of you have been part of another group that talks about diversity quite often. So I think some of that information coming in as well.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Brian.
No, you're good.
What I was also thinking is, so for the next agenda, is there anything that anybody wants to add to that? So we put that on the agenda for next time.
Sam had mentioned.
Sam in the comments did point out that the community input session we have not reached yet tonight, so we may want to roll that over till the next meeting.
Okay, so we'll make that the first thing we address. Anything else?
I think I'm hearing that there's some interest in looking at some of the equity audit tools that are available to get a wider idea of what's on them and what might be tools that we want to consider moving forward with.
One suggestion with that, do you think maybe we should, and this is just open to the group, get that Dropbox or Google Drive and kind of at our own leisure, kind of look at those things before we start bringing tools in? So we all have, at least an idea of what we're talking about and looking at. What does everybody think about that? Or do you want to just bring it to the group and then just discuss it?
I would suggest some form if people are able to review ahead of time, because the length of some of these tools it's hefty. So like one, for example, is 19 pages alone. So I think going through multiple documents of that length together as a group would be very difficult, rather than like maybe reviewing it yourself and coming with some like favorites or some things that you like, areas that you're like, yes, we need that data. That's part of a tool I want. I don't know.
I agree with that. I think it'll make things go smoother.
Would it help to have like an annotated bibliography of tools? Like, here's this tool, here's what it looks at, just so that people can, have like a bullet pointed, these are some different kinds of options?
So who would want to do that?
I'd be willing to be part of a subcommittee doing that.
Okay. How many people do you think we need? More than 2-3 people doing that?
I'm also willing to Google on my own if necessary.
I'll work with Bethany too.
Okay,
since
so we'll
I
have
some
2
tools
people.
already.
Okay.
Gina, you had your hand up and I accidentally put it down. Just something to add.
You're muted, Gina. We can't hear you. She doesn't know. Okay, she's a maybe.
All right. So, I mean, is that pretty much wrapped up where we're at with the agenda for today? Do we have kind of a move from there? Or?
Oh, Mike?
Yeah.
I had one other comment with some of the data we're gathering. I think there was some people had commented about, do we need to get some of those basic demographics of Waunakee students? Is that helpful? Or at this point, do we all, I'm talking like race and number of, students, maybe even understanding sex-wise and all that? Or do we have a basic understanding, like we've talked about, okay, we're all homogeneous and it's more important for us to understand those issues and the climate that we're going to get from other things?
I think we can get that data relatively easily and just dump it into a document that everyone sees, and we can put that in the agenda for the next meeting just to have so everyone has it.
I just want to add very briefly that Rebecca has created a shared Google Drive for our group. Those of you who have Google registered email addresses will have received an invitation to that drive a few minutes ago. Not all of us do. So if you did not receive an invitation to that shared resource, it means that you do not have a Google, the email address we have for you is not Google registered. We can work with you on that. So if you didn't get it, reach out to Rebecca and our IT staff will get you connected.
Thanks, Tim.
So I think for the next agenda item on for future scheduling, did we have a consensus that this would be kind of be a good overall time, like on Tuesday evenings, if that works for most people, or would it be useful to have another Google or another poll kind of going out for when the next meeting works for the most people? Because we got almost everyone for this one. Did that work efficiently to do for the next meeting?
I think if it's working, don't change it.
Okay.
Unless we need to, but how many people didn't show for this one?
I think only 2, to be honest.
Oh wow. So this is working, I guess.
Tuesday nights are going to hit and miss for me. I teach in the fall on Tuesday nights, but I'll be here when I can.
This is good for me as long as we end about now. I have for most of the rest of the year an 8 p.m. discussion section for a history course I'm taking. And in fact, I'm going to have to move out of here in just a little bit for that.
Yeah. Well, I think the next step is we'll put the agenda together and that'll go out as early as possible. Joel and I think can work on that.
Yeah.
And I think we can actually get that out to everyone early enough so if there is anything we specifically missed, it can get added to before it gets out for public notification too. So I think with that, I want to give everybody credit for a good discussion. I think we made decent time. I think everyone on the full board should watch our meetings to see how efficiently they're done. So we get out 2 hours if we can always do that. So with that, I think that's the close of our agenda, and I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I second it.
Thank you, Joel.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And there you go. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.